This is a session about drones. I'm sure you've all seen more and more drone shots in documentaries, in drama, generally in feature films, in adverts, and anywhere that drones can be useful. I think we're going to start off with a quick flight. So, if I put that on my hand, Sean is hopefully going to make it start. Any second now? Go on, will it? Collective wills.
It did work in rehearsal.
It did work in rehearsal. Just a few minutes ago it was flying. There we go. Weighs about 3 ounces, so if it does drop on your head, I wouldn't worry about it. But, this one doesn't have a camera on it, obviously. Well, not obviously, I suppose it could have in principle, but mesmerising, now that had a camera, that would be great. Thank you very much. Excellent flying. So, just to introduce our panel, Sean, who's not on the panel, but is coming along with Andrew, they're from Drone Flight, and Andrew Griffiths is the co-founder of Drone Flight. They provide aerial services. They do training, operator training, provide equipment, and they've done work including 3D modelling. And Andrew personally leads the integration of UAV in hazardous and emergency situations. Yeah. So there we go. UAV being, I know you'll do it. That's correct. Okay. That's Andrew. Next to Andrew we have Emma Boswell, who's the co-founder of the Helicopter Girls. They're one of the first UAV companies licensed to operate in the UK, together with Katia Nelson. Nellen's right. Thank you. Both former documentary producers and directors, so coming from a documentary background and with a particular passion for documentary, they've been building their own drones since 2011, so well ahead of the game for most of us. And their flight teams now work across factual drama, feature films, commercials, and most recently, the most kind of wow, impressive credit is all the drones flying in Mission Impossible 5. Unfortunately, we don't have a clip of straight, but I reckon it will probably look pretty good. Adam G is one of Channel 4's commissioners. He is particularly experienced in commissioning multi-platform productions and short form. It says here he's won over 80 international awards, which is pretty impressive. And particularly here because of, if you're here interested in drones, then I suspect you may all have seen drones in forbidden zones, which Adam commissioned. So I'm going to be talking about drones from the commission point of view. And finally, Jonathan Wells, who's the head of special projects in the global video unit at BBC World Service. So Jonathan's unit pioneered the use of drone cameras at the BBC and was the first major global news broadcaster to use a hexacopter in October 2013. It's crazy, isn't it? It's October 13, that's like 18 months ago, and that was the first use of a helicopter in news. And yeah, it's one of those bits of technology that's moving quite fast. Global Video Unit makes dynamic, innovative features, it says here, for BBC Two, BBC World, BBC Online. Things like Above Auschwitz, above Auschwitz and Above Brazil, both of which we'll see clips from later on, were very popular on the BBC in 2014. And the series My City won an AIB in 2013. So that's your panel. We're going to have a sort of conversation about a number of different aspects of drones. So by all means, stick your hands up. I might not, make yourself a note. Just shout out if you've got a question, frankly. It's much easier. It's going to be a conversation between us, but I want to involve you as well. We've got a sort of running order. If we get to the end of that, I'll try and get some questions in as well. But don't rely on that. If you've got a question, just say. I think we're going to start off with Jonathan telling us, what is a drone?
Andrew.
Sorry. Good start. Andrew, tell us about drones. We've got the Inspire here, and
I've brought a couple with me.
octocopter,
Yeah. Basically, we've got an S1000 there which has a GH4 underneath it. Basically, the way of thinking about it is a tripod or a jib in the sky that you can just basically put it where you want. I'm going to pick up the Inspire and just sort of hold it in the air and point towards the audience, and Sean is going to sort of just show you it moving around, and I'm going to give it a good old shake so you can see how stable the picture is, even on a very low. I mean, it's a very low end piece of kit, really.
We did hope that they were going to fly it, but they said it was too dangerous. Boring. Health and safety. What can you do? But
so basically, Sean's got complete control of that, and he can, set the camera so that it basically will point in a direction regardless of the direction that the machine points in. And if I give this a good old shake, you can see that it really does stabilise the image really well. And these things are, terribly accessible in London. I mean, these are sort of £2,500–3,000. Yeah.
And I'd suggest later on, or actually even now, if you want, come and have a look at the octocopter, the S1000, and it's, they're fascinating bits of kit.
I mean, the small machine has a very small sensor on it, so it's not particularly good in low light. You really need to get to something larger if you're going to use it for, for broadcast. And indeed, Emma's company uses much larger machines to put much bigger cameras on to actually deliver pictures for production companies.
So, excuse me. So, in terms of the legalities of flying, and you've got a couple of slides, haven't you, to show us that?
Yeah, they ran out of inputs, so I'll just run through. I'll run through what it was. Basically, in the United Kingdom, you need a permission for aerial work to do, in effect, commercial work with a drone. There is a bit of a process for going through that. You need to get trained from what's called a national qualified entity on a ground school. These ground school courses are either 2 to 3 days. There's a little exam at the end of all of them. The exams aren't too arduous, but you still got to pass with a good mark. When you've got that sorted out, you need to go away and assemble what they call an operations manual, which is in effect your safe operating procedures for your machine and the work that you intend to do with it. That, when you've got that together, you need to start flying to those operating procedures and practice your flying so that you can actually get through a flight test. There are a few things about flight tests in terms of your ability to maneuver the aircraft, understand the aircraft in terms of what happens in certain emergency situations, and obviously you'll be tested on that with a flight test. Once you got to the end of all of that and you've passed your flight test, you package up all of your information to the CAA, and at a random point in time between 4 and 8 weeks they will send you your permission for aerial work. So it does take people, even if they're very serious about this, at least 3 to 4 months to actually get into a position to be able to fly commercially.
And what they're looking for is purely the piloting skills. So I mean, something like the S1000 or when Emma's working, most people you'll have a pilot and you'll have a camera person. You can have them combined, particularly at the lower end with something like the Phantoms, where it's both. But for the most part, you find it's much better if you've got 2 people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of questions in all of that. The first one is that they are not testing you to fly well to produce good footage. I mean, at the end of this, basically you can fly the machine safely to a standard that they think is okay. You're not, there is no testing your ability to produce the imagery you're looking for. In terms of producing really, really good footage, though, you do have to separate the camera operator from the pilot. There are just some manoeuvres and some filming that you want to do that you just can't do if you just have a single operator pointing a drone in a direction with a fixed camera. It just doesn't work.
So Emma, presumably when you first started, you were in that situation where you were both flying and filming?
Yeah, I'll make sure I say that I'm not the pilot. I'm not the technical half of the helicopter girls. we did start with that. It was a game of kind of we had an F450, which is a little DJI machine, and that's what I still fly. It's like a bullet; you can kind of crash it and it's fine. And it's very much about manoeuvring the copter. So your moves are just less sophisticated. So I think if you as a producer, if I'm having that on my shoot, then what you just need to understand is if you're going to create a kind of dynamic move, you're just not going to get the same quality as you will if you've got a pilot controlling the copter and then a camera operator controlling the gimbal. You can, and then also the kind of beauty comes when the pilot is manoeuvring the copter in one direction and you get that parallax because you're moving the gimbal in another, and that's the kind of playful place, I think, for drones.
And that's why I think when you get an understanding between the pilot and the camera operator, when they work together loads, makes a massive difference. If you're putting somebody, because anyone who operates a camera can come along and start being the sort of co-pilot. But if they have no understanding together, then often you just don't get the right pictures. And it's also just giving the readings back. I mean, we've got one of the videos that will show you that. You'll see the communication, the importance of that communication between the two is, absolutely key.
It is.
So just we'll show that in 1 second. Just before that, I just want to finish, Andrew, with the sort of areas that you train, people who are. I mean, what proportion of the people you're training are filmmakers, and how many are architects and surveyors and so on?
This is really fascinating. I mean, at least half of the people that we train actually don't want anything to do with film. They're actually people who want to do inspection work, or they want to do mapping. They're not looking to film beautiful images. It is interesting, and that's probably changed really significantly over the last sort of 12 months. People have, I suppose, other industries have woken up to the opportunity that the drones provide. The other thing that I feel like I do a lot is, I get people ring up and they say, I want a drone, I want to do films, I'm going to make loads of money doing this, and it's like, all right, this is absurd. You've got no experience of filming. You have no contacts in the filming market. How quickly do you think you're going to make money? And I feel like I spend, probably half my day giving people business advice because they're just being ridiculous. In the audience, if you're all filmmakers of some description and you want to get into this, that's great. You have a market that you can already tap into. If you're, a guy who's close to retirement, you wouldn't believe the number of guys who are close to retirement who want to do this, who has got no background in this, not a photographer, not got any contacts. You'll really struggle to make money, and it'll take you an age, and people forget this.
I'd say that about most of Telly, I think. Okay, so Jonathan, we're going to play the clip from Above Brazil first, and then we'll have a chat about it. So let's have a look at Above Brazil, which I think is clip A. Great. So I think that, I don't know if I speak for myself, there are certain drone shots that are just are so striking. One of them, for example, is in the Kia series Welcome to Rio, where they're dealing with the people in the favelas, and the guy's talking about carrying a fridge up to the top of the favela, and he's talking, and you just cut to what feels like just a slightly different angle from him, and then it just goes back and up, and you just, my God, that's incredible. So they can give this extraordinary additional production value when they're done well. So how did it start with you and your unit? How did that come about?
Well, I think the things we were given time. I think I can't emphasise enough about the time that you need to get going and the training and the time to practice. And then we had the perfect opportunity to go to Brazil. We're making a series ahead of the World Cup called Brazil's Soccer Cities. And we got told, right, take the hexacopters out, but it's not your only tool, it's part of the tool. So we had a jib, we had a steady cam, we had all the other tools that you take on a shoot. But of course, incredibly excited to use this bit of kit. And got to Rio, and we got the permission to film up at the Christ. We were like, geez, this is so exciting. But I think we'll all be guilty of this. We got slightly carried away at the beginning of just using it far too much, and just any time we could get it out. And then, you know, we were like, oh, let's fly over the favelas. But then we had to actually check and think, well, I mean, actually, the Welcome to Rio stuff, I think a lot of that footage, you know, we felt quite uncomfortable with, because obviously it was the BBC team that had done it, but I think it was outsourced. I can't remember to a production.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, a lot of that was flying over people who were not under their control. So we suddenly had to think, well, actually, you know, we can go up at the Christ because we had that fully under our control. We got up at 5 in the morning. We went up. We were there before the tourists arrived. But it was a great sort of learning curve. And, you know, Brazil, as you can see from that video, is just stunning. It just lends itself to hexacopters. But we couldn't go down, you know, the main high street in Sao Paulo and just send it down there. You will have noticed, you know, in that 2-minute video, there aren't that many people. You don't see that many people in any of the shots. And where you do see the people, that was all under our control. It was very carefully choreographed. So when you see the skaters going down, I mean, actually, we've got a behind-the-scenes video that we could play in a moment. You'll see, you know, we've all got radios. There's about 5 of us, you know, starting and stopping, getting it right, making sure the sun's in the right position. You know, so there's a lot of thinking that goes into it. I think the worst thing you can do is think of this as sort of, great, it's like a breaking news tool. You just go out and shoot straight away. You've really got to have, you know, be very carefully considered when you're thinking about the shoot.
I mean, it's interesting, that breaking news thing idea, because I remember I was at the RTS News and Current Affairs Awards earlier this year, and they had a clip reel at the beginning, which was, you know, what they usually do, it's the year of news. And the one clip that really stands out in my memory was a Sky News piece from the tsunami, where they, not the tsunami, the Philippines cyclone, where they started with a standard piece to camera, and then it cut to a drone, and this drone just sort of flew over the reporter and then went up, and you just saw the level of devastation. And, you know, it was a very, very beautifully combined clip reel that they put in, but that was the one that, you know, you go, wow.
That wouldn't have happened. You know, that wouldn't have happened straight away. You know, if the 7/7 bombs, you couldn't just send out a drone straight out. You'd have to, you know, think a lot about it.
But it's partly about the developed world versus the developing world, isn't it? And the fact that, you know, you can go to Brazil and do stuff.
The regulations are totally different. The UK have the CAA, they're very strict. You know, when we were in Brazil, it was totally different. But I think working for the BBC, we try and keep you follow the guidelines of the CAA even when we're abroad. It's very tempting to think, oh, well, we're not under the UK jurisdiction now, so we can just go out and do whatever we want. But we're kind of, you know, very keen that we're sort of show that responsibility.
And so, what are the CAA regs about? Who's going to take that? Who wants to take that?
There's any number of them, you know.
The key ones.
The big deal stuff. It's about people who aren't under your control is one of the big ones. So you need to keep 50 metres away from people who aren't under your control, which obviously, if you've got a wide-angle lens on your machine, it is quite a distance. If you are if you want to fly in a congested area, so for example, this is, you know, Sheffield city centre is a congested area. There are requirements in terms of putting in a non-standard flight plan that gets approved, having a congested area safety case if you are above a certain weight. If you're under a certain weight, you still have to jump through a number of hoops in terms of planning to make sure that the risk has been managed appropriately. There's quite a bit to do, really.
The line of sight one is a line of sight that you can't just fly it off to, even though it's got a range sometimes of 2 or 3 miles. You've got to keep it in your line of sight, and that is usually, I don't know, about 500 metres?
500 metres, 120 metres in the air. And the other thing, of course, is that different machines are different sizes and colours. So if you look at that little white thing there, if that's 500 metres away from you and 120 metres in the air, I would imagine that at least half the audience couldn't see it. Whereas if it's the bigger machine, you could, and it is actually up to you to keep it within, you know, that's the accepted limit, but you need to keep it in your visual line of sight.
And I think the other thing is that to treat helicopter footage totally separately to hexacopter, they are two complementary, you know, tools. They should be used very separately.
One's a lot more expensive.
One's a lot more expensive, but you know they get very different shots. You know, helicopters you can shoot above 150 meters. You know, you can get this height. You can't with a hexacopter. In the UK, you're not allowed to go above 120 meters. So they can be used very differently. Obviously, as you say, are more expensive.
Just a bit, yeah, just a tad. Okay, let's move on. Emma, you're going to talk about the teens clip from Channel 4, which is about looking at how. So I think one of the issues is drones came along and everyone went, oh great, we can go wee and we can go wee and that kind of thing. And then it's a question of moving on from that basic shot that is more than a crane and does something that is kind of exciting and everyone goes gosh at, and really thinking about how to integrate them into productions in creative and interesting and new ways. Should we have a look at the clip first and then talk about how that came about? So if we can play clip B, please. So this was a series of Channel 4 about teens and from Raw, and it was particularly looking at how they communicate with each other and texting and all that stuff. And so when did you get involved in the process, and how did that unfold?
It was really nice. Basically, so the series director was a guy called Bruce Fletcher, and he got in touch. He was partway through the rough cut of the first episode, and he got us to go into the edit and have a little look at what they'd put together, because they were using a lot of different formats already. So they were using GoPros, and I think they even used iPhones and stuff. So they knew what they wanted was big wide, because it was all based on a campus. They knew that they wanted to be to get that kind of geography and that scale. But what they didn't know is how else they could use a drone shot. Was there another way? Was there something else that they could do? And you can see from that they needed quite wide stuff so that they could put text on everything. So we said, well, we've got two possibilities. Maybe we use the larger machine. So we actually used an S1000 with a Pocket Blackmagic for the big high stuff, to give that context, because the quality was better. And then to get the kind of more intimate feel, we suggested that then, because the smaller drones are really playful, I could sort of see that they almost become interactive. They can have prop guards on them, so you can get closer to people. And obviously we're on campus, we're around kids. Everyone needs to be in our control. But the thing that I think is really exciting, and this is the language which I think is all still to sort of be written by you guys, is intimacy and epic. You can get the two, and it's incredibly playful and exciting. And I think they did it really well. And I thought it would be a good example for today, because it's a factual series. It's something which is it's a way of using drones really successfully. And I think you do see them everywhere now, don't you? You see lots of drone shots, and some of them you just think, was there really a reason for that? What does it? If you're me, why is it so fucking wobbly? I think it's exciting, and I think when they play brilliantly when they're adding to your editorial value, and I think that was just a nice example.
And so in that case, where a kid's just walking along and he's texting and so on and so forth, what were you using for that? Was that a Phantom?
It was either the F450 or a Phantom.
And so with something like that, why use that rather than just a Steadicam? Because you get. Do you not get the same effect from a Steadicam? Because
we were much higher up, actually. Right. So in reality, we're using that kind of lovely plane just above people's heads, and you can't get that any other way. So you can't get that. You've just got a much greater plane that you can play with, and give you some tracks, and you have freedom as well. So, and I suspect it was probably a lot cheaper as well for them to use that than it was to use a Steadicam.
Did you say that you had a guard to stop? Is that stop people being? So you can put a guard on you to stop people being injured.
You can put prop guards on the Phantom.
But also the Phantoms, the little plastic propeller. I mean, I've been hit by a Phantom propeller at full speed, and it stings. But that's it. It doesn't cut your hand off. It just stings a bit.
Yeah.
No, but for obviously for the larger ones, that would be a bit.
If you've got a carbon fibre blade that's that long, then
Did you see what happened to Enrique Iglesias?
No.
on stage who tried to catch a drone.
Oh, he did, yeah. It was one of those. Yeah.
It was a trick he does in all his concerts. So he has a drone that comes down, and I think it's got a downlink, so you can see it on the big screen, and he caught it. But on this occasion, he actually took off his little finger. So,
Okay, yeah.
He got taken off stage for a bit.
So the Inspire's a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah.
So, Adam, do you find that, 9 times out of 10 now a proposal comes in and they go, and we're going to have these great drone shots? And is it, how much are people thinking more creatively about drones?
Well, my experience to date, actually, the series that's just coming out at the moment, it was unusually the other way around, where it was something we went with a brief that was very clear, which was basically I wanted a spectacle film using drones. That was the brief. But what it has done is it's catalysed thinking about drones in the channel, because we have these sort of interdepartmental meetings regularly, and so everyone in the commissioning team has looked at these films and has been asked, how does it apply to your genre? So it's been quite a good catalyst for that, for long form. I
was actually in a viewing with Current Affairs last week, and the commissioning editor said, do you think you could get some drone shots in there? Okay, interesting, okay, we can think about it. We're going to have a look at that in a sec, in Forbidden Zones, but I just want to stick with you for a sec, Emma, because the story of how you started in all this is great. Do you just want to tell us about that? But partly because you were so far ahead of everyone else. I mean, that's the wonderful thing, that you were a very, very early adopter.
We were a very early adopter. So my partner in crime is Katia Nellams-Wright, and the two of us have for a long time worked in Factual as producer-directors, and I'm series producer as well. And we were making a film together at the time. It didn't ever go anywhere. It didn't get commissioned in the end. But we were following street dogs in Greece, and we were capturing some really interesting behaviour. It was kind of precursor to all the kind of stuff that came about dogs. And Kat thought, we need to find something remote controlled to stick on top of something and try and follow these dogs, because we can get anywhere. So I bought her a T-Rex 500 helicopter as a joke, and that's quite big, with quite big rotor blades, and that wasn't really going to be something to learn on, but she attached a little lipstick camera to it, and we sort of started playing around with things, and that was around about 2009, and then it was just around about the time when the DSLR cameras had kind of revolutionised everything we were doing, and we all wanted 5D shots in everything. And so the holy grail was, can you lift a 5D? And we went through pain and strife and struggle and, God knows what, just for immense reward, because the multi-rotor thing was kind of happening just as, I think it was probably about 2010, that kind of all started. We got little F450 frames, started messing about with that. I don't even think DJI had their original flight controllers and things then. So it was all very makeshift, and it looked like Meccano, and when you got it in the air, it was kind of wobbly, but Kat she's just a perfectionist when it comes to smooth, stable footage. So we were delighted when we discovered that actually we were only stabilising our original footage by 3% and everyone else was using 5%, so that was good. But we imported a CineStar 8, which is a free fly. If you know the Movies, so Free Fly's original frame was a CineStar 8, and we lifted the 5D, and then we sort of did it for our own projects, and I still sort of knock myself over when I think that we were flying for Mission Impossible 5 this year. So.
Quite impressive, that. I keep saying that quite long.
I'll be dining out on it for a while, I suspect.
So you should.
And so, what about now? What kind of cameras are you using? I mean, on Mission Impossible 5, for example, what kind of cameras are you flying?
So on Mission Impossible, it was a Carbon Dragon that we flew. We kind of. Our passion is image quality. We love, Kat has always wanted to fly better cameras and better lenses, but obviously for Factual that isn't always appropriate, and so we are really passionate about Factual too, and for Factual we routinely fly a machine like this, Because it's transportable and very easy, and it fits your budgets. That's the main aim of the game, and that's really important. But we just got an Alexa Mini this week, very excitingly, and that's our kind of new camera of choice. So we'll be flying that a lot, hopefully, this year.
Can I ask you about Mission Impossible 5? So what were the kind of shots you were getting? How did that differ to shooting for factual? Very different, because
actually, well, I'm not allowed to say too much about it apparently, but and I've got a big mouth, so I better be careful. It was lots of effects plates we were shooting, so we actually had to be like a tripod in the sky in some really, really difficult situations, and what just kind of broadly with drama, what differs is there are lots of additional things that DOPs want to put on the lenses, so you've got to be kind of, there's a lot of that kind of technical stuff that goes in. With the effects plates that we were doing for Mission Impossible 5, they're at the same time kind of mixing and overlaying, so we're precision flying in exactly the right kind of spot so that they can get all the different angles that they want on that shot, because it's then going to be the effects in that they then overlay Tom Cruise jumping into. So it's a lot higher pressure in a different kind of a way, because it's about perfection. Whereas with factual, what is fun, if you can have the time, it's very hard. I think my sort of whole mission is, how can we get directors to have more time playing with drones? Because it's great, we were talking earlier, it's great in your unit, you've got the time to play, whereas routinely we're going out on shoots and people haven't used them before, so it takes you a while to learn what you want to do with it, and also to realise that you can't get a shot which is a macro shot and then pull up to 400 feet. It's just not going to happen. That's not, you have to think about your lenses and all of that. So with factual, I think you can have a lot more room potentially to be creative. With drama, it's very specific. You've got a Cats shooting today where they're doing lots of tracks with in a forest with horse and cart and all sorts of things. So it's kind of fun. And for the first time, that was the very first shoot where we've been told we've got 4 hours to just play with the horses and the carriages and the stand-ins, and we can get whatever we want, and that never happens. So that was, it's lovely, but it is hard. I mean, you with the stuff that you go to beautiful locations and get beautiful stuff, and you don't always have, you need to have realistic expectations as a director if you haven't used them before, and you're not, in the UK we're much more heavily restricted, as you said, with the big machines that we fly, we've got to be 150 metres, so that's a 300-metre bubble around that machine, with everything within that in our control. And so, it's a different game, really, isn't it?
We actually have people who make films buying very small drones, this sort of thing. I mean, proper films. The 007 people bought a Phantom from us when we were selling Phantoms, and they didn't use it to film anything. What they used it for was actually learning what they could do with it and experimenting before they wheeled somebody in to actually take the footage with the bigger drone, which I thought was quite a good idea. It just helps them understand what the art of the possible is. Yeah.
I think True Vision first got involved in drones because someone had suggested, you should look at drones, and so I sent someone to a trade show, and they were asking about drones, and they had to, and part of the deal was, I'll put your card in the hat and you might win 2 days free drone, and so Alice did. She put her name in, put a card in the pot, and then a couple of weeks later they phoned us up and they said, we're going to give you 2 days free drone, and it was then, what are we going to do with that? And eventually, and I said to everyone who was making a film for us at the moment, we've got 2 days free drone, so if you've got something, then by all means go for it. And Lottie Gammon was making a film for BBC One about young carers, and it was all very internal, it was all in the home, and it was all quite tense and bleak, and she thought, well, must be something we can do. So she said, I'll take them, I'll have those 2 days, but didn't really know what she was going to do with them, and then knew there was going to be something around the homes of the young carers, because that was where their life revolved around. It obviously wasn't going to be inside, because it had to be outside, so what would we do? So she did nice high-angle shots of the house and that kind of thing, and she did some drifts in and some nice establishes of them. And then but she didn't really know quite what to do with them, and it was the people who were operating said, well, we find that if there's a bit of movement and if there's people moving around in the shot, that tends to work. And a couple of the 2 young carers, they both really liked skating, and so we just got them roller skating around the cul-de-sac they were in, and they're beautiful, these really beautiful shots that really lifted it visually, from just sort of experimenting and playing with it, and as you say, having the time, knowing that we had 2 days and we could just keep trying until we got something. So, Adam, you actually came from the opposite end and went, right, we want something with drones. So how did the idea for drones in the film?
Well, it was this, basically, I've been doing multi-platform commissioning at Channel 4 for a good time, and then last year they asked me to split my time between that and short form video, and so I just immersed myself in tons of short form, and I was just looking at, just basically using the data that's sitting out there on all the platforms, what really works. And one of the things I saw was a film of some roller coaster ride in the middle of Ohio in nowhere, where someone had just stuck a camera in the front of a roller coaster, and it had like millions of views, and I thought, okay, spectacle. So that was one of the things I wrote down that worked. And then when I was commissioning the sort of first tranche of commissions just to do sort of range finding, I went to an indie and said, can you do me a spectacle film with drones? And I went to another indie and said, can you do me a spectacle film with GoPros? And this came out of the drones one. And then I just sort of set one guiding editorial principle, which was I wanted to remake what I call a native drone film, something that you couldn't make any other way. So I just said to them, if it looks like, if it's something you could have done with a helicopter, kick it out. If it's something you could do with a Steadicam, kick it out. I just want shots that you can only do with a drone.
Great, let's have a look. So this is clip C, please. Beautiful. Great audio mix as well. Really.
Well, the sound design's really important.
Yeah.
I wasn't out on the shoot, and I was really looking forward to seeing the rough cut. And when it came in, it was super disappointing. And I looked at it and I was like, why isn't this film working? I went back to them and said, look, the thing is, you've totally lost sight of the brief. It's about spectacle. So all that stuff that you've got in this film about what year Bass Maltings was made and all these graphics about the history and stuff, I don't give a monkeys about that. Get rid of it all. And I just want to enjoy the flight. And then the other thing I said was, while you're at it, all those bits that are dotted throughout the film about how dangerous this place is, just take them all and stick them at the front. And it wasn't called, the working title was just Drones UK, it wasn't called Drones in Forbidden Zones, but that gave us a sort of an editorial shape for the whole series, where the location's always established as somewhere that's dangerous or very difficult to access or whatever. So then the second cut came in, and it was not very far different from what you've got there. It was, it was completely what was after, but it's the biggest gap between the first, rough cut and the second cut that I've had on any programs. Then really the final thing, coming back to what you were just talking about, was so when it came back pretty much like that, I said to them, look, what I want is basically a Sky Sports noise every time that thing goes in or out of a hole or through a roof or anything like that, and just a bit more subtle than Sky Sports. And so they did a really nice job with the sound design. I mean, I don't know how much we can hear it in the hall here, but given that most of this is consumed with headphones on, it's got a really, really nice mix that's just quite subtle, but it just makes you feel like you're the passage in and out of things, you just really feel it. So that's how it came about, really.
And I mean, I remember one of the other episodes is in the abandoned amusement park.
Yeah.
And
very
one of the
topical.
things that I loved, yeah. One of the things I loved about that was some of the shots where they're tracking back, where there's quite a lot of rubbish around, and the effect of the rotors obviously blowing stuff about. You get this, you sort of got the sense of the presence of the drone because of the disruption.
Yeah, with leaves and things like that. I mean, you see it a little bit in that film as well, but more in the one you're talking about. And also, we sort of sometimes sort of leave in the shadows as well, because the presence is quite nice to be out. Yeah.
I love it, because I must say I'm so used to, everything being, because all of our work has to be so clean, and so to have something where you've got, because I think that's the thing, they've got such personalities. So if you can have that to play, I love the noise, I love the, just like the little bit at the beginning which you'd normally cut out.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice to see that.
Yeah, we put that in. I just wanted a tiny little bit of framing so that people had a sense of what was making it. Yeah.
The occasional crash.
I haven't had that yet.
They haven't told you about that.
No, exactly.
How many? Do you know how many days that was filming for the in the warehouse?
Only 1 or 2, I think. And I think what they normally do is they sort of prep for a day and shoot for a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so far, so it's a series of 6 of this first series. So far, the one that you've just seen, the one that you've just talked about, the other one in the first tranche of releases was inside a cooling tower, which is I was just desperate to see that flight. That turned out to be the most technically difficult flight because of the sort of wind across the top of it. And we've just done one in the Crossrail tunnel, which should be interesting, and a prison and a wind tunnel. So they all have their own personalities. The buildings, really. Yeah.
So that's, you raised some interesting points there in terms of the crosswinds at the top of a cooling tower. How do you technical folk, how do you deal with those kinds of things?
Some of this depends on the situation. With doing inspection work, we get involved with people who want to look at the top of things like cooling towers or very large chimneys, and the wind just whips around in very different ways, and to be honest, it's about having the right machinery and practicing enough. Something like this machine, the S1000, is actually just entirely wrong. All those spinning props, they basically act like a wing. You end up with it's like having 8 dinner plates and a dinner plate in the middle, and if you hold up a board that's about 1 metre across, you know how much you get pushed around. You actually need a slightly different design of machine to actually fly in those situations if it's really bad. We use a machine which will fly in, it's rated to fly in 35-mile-an-hour winds, and if you search for it on the internet you'll find people who've been flying in 60-mile-an-hour winds with it. So it depends on the kit that you're looking for. But this is not, this particular machine is absolutely rubbish for filming with because the gimbal's crap. But the gimbal is for data acquisition. It's not for beautifully smooth filming. So.
And excuse me. And Emma, would you say that people, I'm not asking you to talk yourself out of a job here, but would you say that people should always be using professionals like you, or to what extent? For example, I'll reframe that question. There was This World that went out last week, which I don't know if any of you missed it, or then I heartily recommend you go onto it's on iPlayer at the moment. It's an extraordinary film. It's the definitive film on Ebola, made by Dan Edge and Quicksilver, and it tells the whole story of the Ebola outbreak, and it starts off after the title. It starts off with some kids running through the forest, and they get to a tree and they turn around and they say, "Yes, this was the tree, and the bats came out there," and then the voiceover comes in, and the voiceover starts saying, "This was where patient number 1 of the Ebola epidemic was infected," and then you cut to this beautiful drone shot going up the tree, which is, you're in the middle of the jungle, you don't expect it, and it goes up and up and up the tree, and then out of the canopy, and it's stunning. And there's quite a lot of I think, beautiful drone shots in there. There's a couple of shadows in there, which has led me to email Dan and say, was it a Phantom? And it was, indeed. It was a Phantom, it was a Phantom 2. It wasn't a particularly sophisticated camera. He said, I was just really lucky. I didn't know what I was doing, but, we had it, so we just thought we'd try it. And it really, really added a lot to it, and that's less than £1,000. So, where do you think does that end up doing things where you just?
I think it's interesting. I mean, no, I don't think you always need to have us, and it will happen that production companies, I suspect you've probably thought about at True Vision having your own drone. So we have trained APs and directors who are going out to foreign places where there aren't any regulations, so that they're not, we have to be very clear that you cannot go and do that in the UK, because that's now a criminal offence to do that, and the police are now starting to prosecute. So I couldn't say I'll train you up and then advise you to go out in the UK, but I think. Drones are getting easier to fly. I just think you have to go into it with eyes open, because it takes a lot of time. And we were talking earlier, because in Jonathan's unit, obviously they've got you've got two guys, haven't you, who are kind of pretty much dedicating a lot of time to it, and it isn't easy. So all I would say is you have to go into it with your eyes definitely open, and it takes. There's one production company who we work with, and we shoot for them in the UK, but we train their directors and APs and one of their presenters to go and use them out in the field in very remote places, and when their drones come back, they are knackered, they are broken, they are hopelessly badly treated. You would never treat your equipment in that way, and they've got no idea about how to fix them, so they come to us and we fix them and make them as good as new, and then send them back out again to go. And I think you have to have something like that, because otherwise, you could do some pretty serious damage. And so eyes open, but why not? Because you can buy an Inspire they asked us to train them to use an S900, which is the slightly smaller version of that S1000, and it's and I said, okay, right, you're going to go out. You want to pretend. They wanted to pretend that it was. I don't know, because they were going somewhere where it would be people would be a bit sceptical about drones and they might get arrested or whatever. They needed to pretend it was something else. So I said, well, okay, you've got a massive, great box you're going with. You've got to go with LiPo batteries. They're like little bombs. How are you going to look after those? You've got to think about so many other bits of kit. You can't just go.
In terms of the transporting the kit is a big thing that people just don't think about. I mean, you guys have got, what, 2 big Pelly cases? We have 3 Pelly cases. In total, they weigh about 50 kilograms.
Yep.
So you've got the excess, what that costs. You just got shipping them around. They don't fit in conventional cars. You need to have a bigger van. And if you're going to a remote location, they might not have a suitable van to carry them. And then you've got, as you say, you've got the lithium batteries, which unfortunately look like a bomb. And then you're going through, and every time you have to take it through with your hand luggage, and then the security guy goes, "What's this?" You have to explain. Like the whole process it's a really drawn out process, and then you normally find if a lot of the countries are not quite sure of the regulations. You normally find you ring someone up, they're always going to say no. So then there's the question of looking into the regulations, how much they know about them, do they actually know what they're talking about? So there's all these extra elements which you just don't even dream thinking about when you start travelling abroad. It's not straightforward.
And even if you follow the regulations, you still get your stuff confiscated. It does happen. Things like batteries, I've lost them going through customs in places because they just look at it and say, well, you're not bringing it in. Fair dues. What am I going to do? I'm just going to have to go and buy some locally. It's all you can do.
So Emma, I'm intrigued. They wanted you to train them on the S900, but you persuaded them to do the Inspire.
They went back to their for cost reasons. I think they went back to their Phantoms. We said to be honest, I really didn't know where we would stand if we were training people that we then knew would do. Because you could kill someone with an S900, and I didn't really want to be involved in that because I'd very happily train somebody up to fly it, but it's a massive deal. So. Unless we had some more discussions about how they were going to manage it, I wouldn't have felt comfortable just saying, okay, fine, here you go, this is what you do. Sort of too much to learn.
So you train them to fly?
So we train them to fly Phantoms, yeah, and they do, and you know, we tend to give people just a day's training, and they pretty much nail it after a day, as long as they can then go away and, you know, spend time practicing and stuff. And they clearly do crash. I mean, they do crash, whereas we don't crash.
You see, I mean, you get one of the things is education. You know, if you're procuring the services, because I got an email the other day saying, look, we'd like you to fly off the coast around Scotland, these locations, blah blah blah. We want you to fly from a boat. We really want you to fly this S100, 1000, and here's a picture of the boat you're going to fly off. It's like, geez, not a chance. You know, I mean, look at the size of it. You know, the propellers are going, and there's a platform on the boat that's about 1.5 meters across. You know, I mean, it's just not going to happen. And unless people have seen the kit and they've got some experience of what it's actually like to operate it, they will make really poor judgments about what you can do and what you can't do.
Let's get more of a sense of that by having a look at some behind-the-scenes footage. So, Jonathan, you've got a clip. This is from Brazil, isn't it?
Well, it's a mixture. There's shots from all over, but it's kind of just behind-the-scenes footage matched up with the actual footage.
Okay, lovely. So that's clip D. Have a look at that. So, give me stats. What's that all about?
That's the height. So that was what I talked about. You know that I was saying earlier about the relationship between, you know. So that's Rianne, who's the co-pilot now, and was the pilot. And so the stats. So he wants to know: is it going up or down? Because he's just looking. He's looking at the whole time. So he hasn't got any monitor. So he doesn't know what it's actually doing. So she's giving the altitude, saying it's going up, it's going down. So at that point, he was trying to hover it. So she's saying it's going up by 1, going down by 2, all the rest of it. And so he wants those stats being fed to him the whole time.
So you've got a pilot and a co-pilot and a camera operator?
No, so I say the co-pilot. The co-pilot is the camera operator, but also acts as a co-pilot because they offer up the stats. Because they've got, on their screen, they've got all the stats of, you know, the height and the altitude and all the rest of it. And the battery, they can tell them how much battery power is left. Because I think, you know, you think, oh, you'll be flying for ages. No, you've got 6 to 8 minutes for each flight. So one of the things you obviously don't want is that the camera runs out of battery at a couple of 100 feet.
Yeah. So those, I mean, the Auschwitz shots were really chilling. Had anyone done that before at Auschwitz?
I don't think anyone had ever done Auschwitz before. I wasn't there on that shoot, but the guys, I think it was the news gathering, BBC news gathering team came to us and said, will you go and do for the 70th anniversary of Auschwitz? And when they spoke to the guys there, they said no one had ever done it by, you know, drones. And I think that went on to the BBC News YouTube channel, and we've got more hits than anything else has ever been on the BBC News channel, YouTube channel. So that was a great success. There's one other video talking about, I don't know if you've got it.
I think we have, the clip E. So
there's the one from a boat. You're taking off from a boat.
Okay.
This is quite interesting. When we had this.
So we play that. We play that, and you talk.
Yeah, I'll just set it up. So we were shooting a series for World War I called. No, it's not this one actually. It's,
why don't we play this one while you talk about it anyway? Because this is nice to look at. So you talk while that's playing.
Okay, so this is the Christ, this is one of our first flights with the copter, and I think what Andrew was saying before about the wind pockets, because the Christ is about 700 meters above sea level, so you've got lots of gusts of wind coming all over the place, but because of the gimbal it looks very smooth, but I can tell you it was very, very hairy. We plus had the time pressure knowing that the tourists were about to arrive at 8 a.m. and there was no leeway on that. We had to get it shot. We knew we were leaving the next day. We got the shot, it came down and it's on the monitor, and unfortunately you don't have a downlink, so it's not recorded, so we got it with, thank God, 5 minutes to the tourists arrive, and the camera operator said, I didn't press record. So because you could see it on the screen, you could see the shot. So we all said, we've got it. She said, so I didn't press record.
Yeah, everyone's done that.
So we just quickly, there they are.
Oh, very good.
We sent it back up, and Rianne, to her credit, she was the person who had forgotten to press record, but she nailed it, and that's the shot you obviously then see in the video you saw earlier. So that certainly had its challenges, but it was a very kind of rewarding shot. But after that, as I said, the drone was behaving very badly, and you often find that, and you can see it's a very grey day as well, and it's, if it started raining, that would be game over. If the wind starts picking up above, well, it depends, as you say, on the size of the...
Depends on the kit you use as well.
Yeah, it does depend on the kit. Yeah. But with us, it's sort of 20 miles an hour. When it goes above that, you'll, and as soon as it starts raining, that's it as well.
Again, that depends on the kit you use. That you can get kit which is waterproof, but it depends what you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can we play the next clip now, and we'll have talk us through this. This
really was quite challenging. So we're doing a series about World War I. Our remit was to find stories outside of Europe. So we found this old World War I warship in Tanzania, which still sails today as a ferry. So you can see that's the little boat. If you're looking on the left, that's what we took off from.
Yeah.
And Owen had probably a metre square to take off from. Yeah. We had to build our own makeshift helipad.
Did you catch it on the way back?
No, he kind of crash landed it.
Excellent. Yeah.
But we had so this ferry, although everyone on board knew that we were flying, so we had to make sure that they knew we were there and they were under our control. They weren't going to hang around for us. They weren't going to just say you can have as many shots as you want. So we had to. It's a ship that sails every 2 weeks, so we had to make sure we were there at the right time. And we had a 10-minute window while it was just sitting in dock, ready to go into the harbour. Yeah. But the shots are very rewarding that we got from it. And hats off to Owen, because obviously if anything goes wrong above water, that's, as we call it, game over. And not only is that's the end of your footage, but you then don't have the hexcopter for the rest of the trip, and you go back and the people at home aren't very happy with you, so they then can't take it out on the next shoot either.
So you talked about a downlink. So how often the cameras you're using, are they recording on board, but you're getting a feed, but it's not a high quality feed, or do you have HD
well, you can
feeds?
have both. So we've got an HD downlink. We have a Teradek Bolt 2000 Pro, which is your kind of full HD thing with a patch antenna, so we can get quite a long range with that. But then. It's interesting because downlinks, I sat on a panel at Wildscreen last year, and it was quite interesting talking to the NHU, because you then realise that a lot of us were actually, SD downlinks are routinely much more stable. We will fly with an SD downlink on. If we're flying a Pocket Blackmagic or something like that, then we'll just use an SD downlink. But we've also started to record. It only records 720, but we take we use an Atmos Shogun, so we can record. We've got a kind of backup in case anything does happen. So, but yeah.
I think that's the next thing we're going to get, is the copter with a downlink. So if it does go in the drink, you've still got the shot.
But I think also, if you've got a copter with a downlink, then you can fly into a volcano or something like that and get the most extraordinary shot. And if it then, there's suddenly a pop on it, you lose the copter. You've still got the material.
That's the shot we're dying to do, is the volcano shot.
Fishing around in the lava to try and get the SD card out. So one of the things I want to go on to is what's the future of programming. So we've talked about, Adam, you've commissioned stuff that is specifically, you could only do this with a drone. We talked a little bit about trying to be more creative, like in the teens, where it's not just the sort of up and wow shot, but it's more integrated into it. What other things? What have you got plans for that you can talk about for other ways of doing drone stuff?
I have, but I can't easily talk about it. But once I start to think about it, there's loads of fantastic things you can do. I think the guiding principle is just that you just want to see stuff that you've never been able to see in that way before.
Do you think that'll be a saturation point? when we get to where we're like, oh, we're now bored of the...
I don't think it's too near, really. But you know, there are some sort of shorts made with drones that really kind of stand out, and those are the sort of they tend to be doing that sort of thing. So, you know, there was one last year of a fireworks display from inside the fireworks display, which was terrific. One of my other favourite ones is a drone going down this drug dealer street, and it gets nicked at the end when it lands. But it's one of those.
Presumably they had a download.
No, they must have, because the last thing you see is the drone is on the passenger seat as the guy drives off with it. But those sort of things, you know, they're a real inspiration. Just all the time trying to think of things that you've never been able to see it like this before.
What do you think about the future?
Well, I think it's what's quite interesting is there's a craze at the moment which is FPV racing. So drones are going to become. I know that there's several things in production and in the sort of, you know, commissioning channels maybe you're even involved in. And so FPV racing is I love what the stuff that you've commissioned, because it reminds me of FPV flying. So FPV is first-person view. It's actually not really legal for us to do that, because it means you're flying by a screen or you're flying with goggles on. But so what people do is they race circuits. So it's become really sexy, really exciting, and we're putting a women's team together, and it's just going to be a really big deal. It's going to be fun, and so that I think will happen on TV. I know that there are a couple of, because we were asked to be part of a team on for a game show. So there's something like that happening. There's a kind of a sort of robot wars type feel thing happening. So I think drones will be on screen in a different way. I think the type of commissioning that you're doing will lead to people being less fussy about it being so beautiful. I think it will become, I think people will actually really start to nail editorial with it, which I think is a really kind of exciting direction for it. And also I do think everybody will start getting their own smaller drones. So I fully expect not to be doing that kind of work, but to be maybe there as a support role, or maybe there to you know, to kind of advise with all the stuff that, you know, the bank of knowledge that we've gained. And I really hope we're trying to do something which is to give directors more hands-on time. So we get people who haven't used drones before. We try and get people to come to our flying site and just operate the gimbal, so you can get a feel. We've even got teams flying Phantoms, just because it just gives you a bit more of an idea about how to use them. And that's what I'd really love to see is the language growing, I think.
I think, in terms of your question about reaching saturation point, I think one of the things that drones do is that they make possible on telly at realistic budgets the kind of shots that we're used to seeing in feature films that have traditionally been either done with helicopters or wires, or more often actually have been done with special effects. And there are things that, you know, drones can do that you could only have done with special effects a few years ago, but we've seen that in the movies. So when we see it on telly, we're just kind of quite impressed, but we don't think, oh, that's a bit professional.
I mean, I find that the least interesting thing, you know, where it's just a cheap helicopter, that's the least interesting thing, although of course within the industry circles it's an interesting thing, but from a viewer's point of view they don't really distinguish. It's like,
but I think it's adding production values to
I think that's true,
and it's
it doesn't have that kind of wow factor.
I think
for the average punter, I don't think.
A lot of the sort of action sports stuff, some of the videos, the sort of Danny McCaskill video style of thing, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. I think you see some really different approaches taken, and one of the I get a little frustrated when people do things illegally, but the truth of the matter is some of the stuff that's done illegally is actually quite cool.
The stuff up the Shard.
You know, well, it is amazing. It's terribly illegal, but there you go. But people who are unconstrained. The unfortunate thing is people who are unconstrained actually do things that are a bit more creative. they perhaps should be a bit more constrained, but you know.
And so, talking about constraints, I mean, where do you think the law's going, and the CAA and so on and so forth? Where do you think? Because they're clearly playing catch up at the moment.
For me, because we work around the world, it just feels that the authorities are constantly trying to play catch up, and they can't decide what they're going to do. So I think that is the kind of potential roadblock down the line. Is, you know, for example, we were going to shoot in India, and then we've had to pull the shoot because they've suddenly issued these letters saying there's going to be absolutely no UAV use at all in India at the moment. How long that goes on for, I don't know. I know America's just changed their regulations. I think they've softened them a bit.
I mean, we had people from NBC coming to the UK for flight training and then going to do the resource group course. So they had a UK permission for aerial work, so they could go back to the FAA and say, hey, I've got UK permission, can I have an exemption please? And they would be granted an exemption because they had a UK permission. So I mean, you know, there's all sorts of oddities going on before the FAA opened up, you know. So people work their way around it.
I suppose the other worry is if there is a major incident, there was the close call at Heathrow Airport, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You know, if a drone ends up causing a major crash, then obviously everything's going to be thrown up.
And someone flew one over the White House, and so something that erupted in the States.
Yeah, if you're a conspiracy theorist, I mean, an employee flew a drone over the White House, and his job was something to do with researching drone use. You know, I mean, you know, I'm a conspiracy theorist sometimes. I wonder whether they did it to raise the profile, but there you go.
I remember seeing there was a clip on Gogglebox where the Asian family were watching something and it had a drone shot in, and there was then a conversation, and one of the young lads was saying, it'd be great to get a drone, and the other one said, yeah, Asians with drones, bad idea. So that's where the law's heading. What about technology? What are we expecting in terms of?
The thing it's going to get really interesting, because you've got companies like DJI licensing Micro Four Thirds technology, and what I think you'll start to see is drones that are this size, the smaller size, with actually pretty big sensors on, and they'll be very, very capable. There are already some examples of quite small drones that actually can put very capable cameras on, something called the Falcon 8, which is it's like this big, you know, and you can get a Sony A7S on it. And I think that will be a big trend, because obviously lighter, more efficient, less risky to use. You know, I think that will be a big deal. And I really do think that that's probably the big thing over the next 12 months, smaller drones that have just got much, much better cameras.
And probably hopefully batteries will kind of, I think what we're really, I feel that certainly as an operator, I think my biggest headache is always batteries. Because it's sort of like we've moved from being, I feel like our drones have moved from being kind of hobby to being, you know, kind of really pro kit, but the batteries still feel like they're stuck in.
Yeah, they're so heavy.
Yeah,
and
they're
take
heavy,
so long to charge.
they're difficult, and you can't travel with them on planes. You know, all the batteries that we fly with are over 100 watt-hours, which means you can't travel with them on a plane. So we then have to, if we're taking, you know, we sort of either have to work out can we fly parallel batteries, or we have to get, you know, companies to freight them out, and then that puts a couple of grand on your bill. So that's, you know, it's difficult. But I think there's other things that are quite exciting as well, because there's all sorts of there's all kinds of, you just look at all the Kickstarter projects, you know, people developing sense and avoid technology. DJI just announced, didn't they, about sense and avoid technology. So I suspect that there'll be technology that makes our lives easier, because I feel we sort of have to make it look easy, but it's actually really hard. And so hopefully our lives will get better, will get easier, so it'll be easier to deliver you know, exciting footage, and but also there's all sorts of other things like photogrammetry and LiDAR, and those, I mean, LiDAR, maybe that's going to be always above a documentary budget, but photogrammetry, you know, you've suddenly got the ability to, we were talking about this earlier, you've got the you can do mapping, you can do 3D mapping, and that can have an application in you know, it's exciting.
Yeah. We've just bought a toy called piece of equipment. It's called an EV drone, and that is different because it's pre-programmed flight, and it will go up for 40 minutes. and it takes a series of photos
Yeah.
in high definition of the ground, and then you can map the floor in 2D or indeed in 3D, you know, which is incredibly useful. It's a different use. You're not doing video footage, but you're getting high definition of maps and, you know, parts of the world that you've, you know, never been properly mapped before.
But I mean, this sort of thing is, I mean, you know, we were up in Scotland the other week doing an NHS site. I mean, somebody talked about hiding. You know, we arrive and turns out that none of the local community want this new hospital. You know, so we've got the van that says drone flight on the side. We've got all the safety gear. It's like we're going out without all of this. We're going to get into the corner of this field and we're just going to quietly do this mapping job that we've got. But what they needed to do was they have to preserve the bowling green, and they've got to build a hospital around the bowling green. It's absolutely ludicrous, you know, millions and millions of pounds. You can't shift the bowling green. And what they wanted the architect wanted a 3D model of the terrain so that he could redo his scheme with the bowling green in the middle, you know. And that's the sort of silliness you get involved with.
So we've just got a few minutes left for some questions. Who's got a question? Yeah. Just wait for a mic to... Have we got mics? Do we have mics?
I'll shout.
Yeah, just shout. That's easier. Be quick.
I just wanted to ask your advice about shooting animals. And what works, what doesn't work in both kind of the wide open fields and then also in an urban area.
Did you say shooting animals?
Yeah. Depends on the animal.
Have you seen the YouTube clip of the guy, the shepherd, the sheepdog drone? You go on YouTube. There's a clip of a guy who has a drone, and his sheepdog was sick one day. So he then thought, I wonder if I can herd the sheep with my drone, and it works really rather well.
Yeah.
Are you horses? So. Right. The horses that we've worked with have all, we've only shot horses really for drama. We've been in fields around them and they kind of show an interest. And we've learnt the hard, well, not the too hard way, but we've learnt not to shoot ourselves from the field that the horses are in, because they tend to get quite interested and come up to you and push you around. I think that the horses that we work with have all been introduced to drones already, so because they do spook. We did a test because we wanted to see how we were doing a tracking shot of a horse and rider for Da Vinci's Demons, and we sort of went and found a rider so we could just see what would happen, and also see if we could keep up with the horse as well. And it took about 20 minutes or so to just get the horse acclimatised, and then it was fine. And actually then they don't notice. We also did, for about 3 months, we were working on a farm, we were kind of tracking the seasons for a series on BBC One, and the horses there didn't notice us after about 2 weeks. Weren't even bothered.
Yeah, I mean, the only experience I've got with horses is the Met Police horses, and they actually wanted us to fly different sized machines right up to them, I mean literally right in front of them, to see whether they would be spooked, and they just didn't care at all. I mean, they just weren't bothered at all. But I mean, when they train them, they get like 40 people, and they have buckets of tennis balls, and they're just throwing hundreds of tennis balls at them as they run forward, so they really don't care. But different animals, you know, wildebeest run away from an Inspire, but they don't run away from an S1000. I don't know why. So, you know, I couldn't tell you why. It's probably to do with the frequency of the noise, but it depends on the animal.
I tell you what, I'll take that question in a sec. In the meantime, while we take the question, can we just play clip G, the Jägermeister piece, because it's beautiful to look at.
At the moment, it's probably about as easy as it's ever going to be.
It's a golden era, I think. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are a couple of things. One, the technology is probably as cheap as it will ever be, because the regulation that will overlay it will increase. Then the other thing is, if you look at the actual standard of the flight test, it really is, can I operate this to the process that I say, and am I moderately safe in the air? You know, I mean, it's not really that high, and it's clearly going to go up. So, I mean, if you really want to do it, doing it now is probably a good thing. Because
getting a license.
Getting a license, yeah. Because it will be...
I'm holding back slightly, because isn't it a case that you get a license for a specific drone. So it's not
no, it depends on whose certification you go with, which NQE you go with. Some of them will get you to sit extra flight tests. It's not actually necessary. One of the NQEs, you need to do a flight test in a weight category, and then as long as your process is written up and it's submitted, it's fine. So it's not actually as wild as it used to be. I mean, I've done 12 flight tests, and that's completely unnecessary now. So, you would do one in your weight category.
But I have to say, I'm slightly concerned that you said you had a Phantom, and the Phantoms have the fail-safe, which is that if they lose themselves, they fly back to where they're supposed to be, but you just flew off.
I mean, if you Google Phantom flyaway, you'll see it's happened to a lot of people. They're pretty dodgy machines, I think. I mean, I've lived in China, I know how haphazard some of their practices can be. Maybe that's another question. Like, what do you think about DJI? I've got a friend who I think did your series, Chris Bates, and he really doesn't like DJI. He thinks they're a really dodgy company and that all their drones are kind of crap. And I think he might have one, but he's speaking from experience. The experts in the panel on the drone.
I have to say that we've never had a problem with any of ours. We've never had a problem with our A2. We've got an A2 flight controller on the S1000 or S900, whatever it is now. And if Kat was here, she'd say that 90% or 99% of those flyaways are probably pilot error, because a lot of people don't like reading instructions, and you have to read the instructions. You really do, because if you don't, somebody said to me the other day, a guy called Vincent Laforêt, who's a big kind of aerial DOP, and he said, I think drones are really, nightmare. Some my friends were doing from the farm or something were doing. They set their return, this was with one of those big Aragon drones, the intuitive aerial ones, massive. They set their return to home position, but then they walked forward a couple of paces, set the return to home off, which I don't know why you would do that anyway unless you were actually testing your return to home, and it hit him in the face. But he stepped too. That was his fault. Yeah. That's not the drone's fault. So I think a lot of times those things, it's very easy to sort of say I'm not, and we do use DJI drones, but we build our own as well. So their drones are not always big enough for what we need. But I think it's easy to think that it's their fault, and actually a lot of it is pilot error.
I'd just like to add, it wasn't in my case, but
you're in the 1%. Yeah.
I'm not sure this is a completely appropriate question. Many years ago, on terrestrial television, there was a chap who went to Peru or South America, and he built this big contraption so he could film himself because he was alone. And it was great, it was quite groundbreaking, and he'd never seen one where he had all strapped in like his selfie. And he made this documentary because he had to go in and out, So I'm wondering, is there any place in the future where you won't need that and you'd have something whizzing around sensing him, just close so that you can tell your story without another human present?
It's on its way, I think. That is all on its way.
There's one at the moment that you can, is it a Kickstarter? Is it actually
It's a Kickstarter.
The one that you just throw and it follows and it'll hover. Yeah. And you carry a sensor and it just follows you.
It doesn't work though. The sense and avoid technology or the collision technology at the moment, they haven't got enough. I don't know. It's very expensive, I guess. So the thing is, it's designed to follow you down a slope or whatever. But if you're looking that way and then it's going to go into another skier, you can't. So it's sort of.
You just fly into a tree. I mean, that's the problem with it.
I think it's good for. I think for water skiing or something like that, because that one's waterproof, isn't it? The one that the one I've seen anyway. They say you just throw it in the air.
The Lily.
And it sort of will hover a certain distance away from you. So it's designed, it's waterproof. So they're obviously thinking in terms of water sports, but then to follow you on a jet ski or something like that, you'll get awesome videos.
They have this awesome launch video where a granny just throws it up in the air, and that kind of I think it will go there.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Yeah.
It is a good video.
Thank you. I'm producing an architecture documentary, a profile of an architect, and we've become aware of the technology of drones and movies, and because past architecture documentaries have often just had static camera shots of the architecture of the buildings, and we're aware of this, and we want to try and incorporate it. But obviously, we're working at really low budget, and at the moment we're budgeted for about €200,000, and got bought. And this guy that we're doing this has got buildings in about 70 places, and obviously to try, and obviously we've got the DOP and the director have not worked with this before. So my kind of open-ended question is, what would you advise them to start off? What would be the first thing you would say to them to say this is what you should do?
I think I would say, I suppose the first things that I think of with buildings are there's a whole host of regulations. Did you say it was in this country?
Actually, most of them are in the States. There's some in New York City, some in Connecticut, and there's one or two in Europe.
So in America at the moment, I think these things might be changing, but at the moment in America there's only a few people who are licensed. So it's really hard to do in America at the moment. And actually I was having a conversation with a DOP who's shooting a movie, and he said that this is the state, because I said, can't we come and do your aerials? And he said, no, because you've not got the right licenses. But they have to get someone from LA, and they were charging them $25,000 for 2 days. So it's kind of gone bonkers. Yeah, it's gone bonkers. You actually have to have a license to fly manned aircraft at the moment in America, I think. That might be changing, but...
The other interesting problem is, I mean, you mentioned sort of 70 buildings, right? You know, if you just look at the paperwork required, you know, like we've got to do a risk assessment of each shot, you've got to, you've got to work out whether you need to...
about 10. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there's a building near where my office is, and the architect wanted a picture of the building, you know, and it's kind of like, yeah, cool, we can do a picture of the building. And it's like there are 18 property holders, right, within 50 metres, you know, and it's one of those peculiar locations where you just wouldn't realise it was like that, but it is. So there's 18 people to seek permission from before you actually go and crack on and do the job. Now, buildings like that will be the same, you know, they will have probably more.
Okay. I think we're running out of time, I'm afraid. So thank you very much to my excellent panel. Thank you all for coming.
£200,000 sounds like it was going over.